The silence of space shattered as the first Surak warships appeared on the outer rim of human space. Massive and imposing, their hulls were designed not only for war, but to instill fear. The Surak were a race of conquerors, and their fleet reflected their brutal nature. The ships seemed to distort space around them, warping light as they moved, giving them an otherworldly presence. As they advanced, communication from the human forces grew frantic. The humans, once confident in their defenses, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that didn't just outmatch them technologically, it outclassed them in every conceivable way. For years, humanity had expanded, colonizing new worlds, and establishing a strong presence in the galaxy. But none of their technology could prepare them for what was coming. The Surak were faster, stronger, and relentless. They tore through the human colonies like a storm, wiping out entire fleets with a single devastating wave of energy. The attacks were swift, brutal, and without warning. Planet after planet fell. With each victory, the Surak grew bolder, and humanity's hope began to dwindle. On the eve of their final stand, when the human fleets were battered and broken, something unexpected happened. A strange blip appeared on the radar. It was small, inconspicuous, but it was moving toward the Surak's advance. At first, it was dismissed as a malfunction, a mistake, perhaps a rogue asteroid or a stray probe. But as the blip grew closer, its trajectory became clear. It wasn't an asteroid, it was a ship. The Valkyrie. At first glance, it seemed like any other human warship. It wasn't particularly large, nor was it as heavily armed as some of the Surak ships. But the Valkyrie had something that no one could explain. It was alive in ways no ship had ever been. As it emerged from the edge of the human fleet, a ripple ran through space, distorting the fabric of reality itself. It moved in an impossible pattern, like it was out of sync with the very laws of physics. No one could understand how, but the Valkyrie seemed to ignore conventional space travel altogether. It didn't just fly. It shifted, appearing at one point in space, then vanishing and reappearing somewhere else. The Surak, who had watched as human fleets crumbled under their power, turned their attention to this strange vessel. For the first time since the beginning of their campaign, they hesitated. This was not like any enemy they had ever encountered. The ship's energy signature was unlike anything they had encountered before. It didn't just defy expectations, it broke the rules. Captain Ilara Stone stood at the bridge of the Valkyrie, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The crew, a ragtag group of veterans and volunteers, stood by, ready for whatever came next. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but Stone didn't flinch. She trusted the ship, her ship. There was something almost alive about the Valkyrie, as though it had a will of its own. Something deep inside it resonated with the crew, guiding them, pushing them beyond their limits. "This is our moment," Stone muttered to herself, her fingers tracing the edges of the controls. "We fight, or we die." With a sudden jolt, the Valkyrie accelerated, darting into the heart of the Surak fleet with unthinkable speed. As the ship engaged its weapons, the Surak watched in disbelief. Energy blasts ricocheted off the ship's hull, as though they were nothing more than raindrops. The Valkyrie was not just another ship. It was a mystery. It was a weapon. And in that moment, humanity's hope was reborn. The Valkyrie didn't just survive the battle. It dominated. The Surak, accustomed to facing fleets that folded before their might, found themselves struggling against an enemy that didn't follow the rules. The ship's movements were erratic, unpredictable. One moment, it was darting across the battlefield, weaving between enemy ships with impossible agility. The next, it vanished into thin air, only to reappear on the other side of the Surak fleet. The Surak commanders, experienced in space warfare, couldn't fathom how the Valkyrie was outmaneuvering them. No ship, human or alien, had ever exhibited such behavior. Captain Ilara Stone stood at the bridge, her eyes narrowed as the battle unfolded. Her hands danced across the controls with practiced precision, her focus unbroken. She could feel the pulse of the ship beneath her fingers, an energy that seemed to flow through her, connecting her to the Valkyrie in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't just the technology. It was something deeper, something more primal. Enemy reinforcements approaching. The tactical officer reported. They're closing in on our position. Stone didn't hesitate. Bring the ship to full speed. Prepare for the next phase. As the Valkyrie raced toward the Serac fleet, a strange sensation washed over the crew. It wasn't fear or anxiety. It was more like the ship was anticipating something, as if it had known this moment was coming all along. There was a sense of inevitability. The crew exchanged wary glances. None of them had any real understanding of how or why the Valkyrie moved like it did, but every person on board felt the same thing. This ship was not just a tool. It was something more. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, the Serac were regrouping. Their advanced warships formed an imposing wall of energy weapons, ready to strike down the Valkyrie. It was a strategy they had used countless times before. The human ships, unable to match the sheer firepower, would be obliterated. But there was something about the Valkyrie that didn't fit. Instead of retreating or attempting to engage directly, it danced in and out of their range. A blur of motion that seemed to confound every targeting system the Serac had. "Get me a read on their weapons," demanded one of the Serac fleet commanders, his voice tight with frustration. "Why aren't they attacking?" The sergeant at his side stared at his console, his fingers trembling. I can't. Their weapons don't register. It's as if they're altering the space around them. I've never seen anything like it." The Serac commander cursed. They must be using some sort of trickery. Open fire, all ships. But the Valkyrie was already gone. A surge of energy erupted from the ship as it broke free of the Serac's sights, leaving them in confusion. It was almost as if the Valkyrie wasn't bound by the same rules that governed the Serac's technology. As it reappeared on the far side of the fleet, its weapons unleashed a barrage of fire that tore through the closest warship. It wasn't just the destructive power. It was the way the attack seemed to bend space itself. The Serac ship exploded in a flash of light, its remains scattered in all directions. The remaining ships tried to retaliate, but it was too late. The Valkyrie was already on the move again, its systems moving faster than any human had ever thought possible. The Serac fleet began to fall apart, their formations disintegrating under the relentless assault. In a matter of hours, what had seemed like a certain defeat for humanity turned into an unlikely victory. The Serac, for the first time, retreated. As the battlefield cleared, the crew of the Valkyrie stood in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. The Serac, who had once been invincible, had been forced to retreat by a single ship, but no one was quite sure why or how it had happened. Stone was the first to speak. Her voice was calm, but her words carried a weight that none of them could ignore. "This isn't over. They'll come back." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Captain Stone was right. The Serac were relentless. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a glimmer of hope. The Valkyrie had shown them that they could fight back. And they would. The mystery of the Valkyrie was far from solved. But one thing was certain. It wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's answer to a galaxy that had underestimated them. The Valkyrie's victory over the Serac had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. News spread quickly that a single human ship had turned the tide of battle, defeating a force that had crushed everything in its path. But despite the victory, the Valkyrie was far from untouchable. It had survived, but at great cost. The ship was battered, its systems damaged, and the crew was exhausted. Yet, Captain Elara Stone knew that they couldn't rest. The Serac would be back, stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever. As the Valkyrie limped back to human-controlled space, Stone stood at the bridge, watching the stars ahead. The ship's strange power was undeniable, but it wasn't infallible. She needed to understand it, every aspect of it. How could something this powerful exist, and why had it appeared now? when humanity was on the verge of collapse. There were more questions than answers, and the answers she found only seemed to lead to more mysteries. "Captain," came a voice from behind. It was Lieutenant Carter, the Valkyrie's chief engineer. His face was tired, his uniform smeared with grease and burn marks. But his expression was serious. "I've analyzed the ship's systems, and there's something strange happening. The ship's energy reserves, they're growing." Stone turned to face him. "Explain." "We've been at full power for hours now after that battle. The Valkyrie should have drained its reserves by now. But instead, they're increasing. Not just holding steady, growing. It's as if the ship is drawing energy from somewhere we can't trace." That was impossible. No human technology operated like that. Everything required fuel, resources, maintenance, but the Valkyrie didn't seem bound by those limitations. "Can you pinpoint where it's coming from?" she asked. Carter shook his head. "Not yet, ma'am. The systems are different. We're still trying to understand them. But whatever is happening, it's not just the ship's engines. It's like the Valkyrie is, alive, and it's getting stronger." Stone stood in silence for a moment, contemplating. The ship was growing more powerful, but why? And how? Whatever answers lay ahead, Stone knew they had to find them fast. The Serac would not be satisfied with a single defeat. They would return, and when they did, the Valkyrie would have to be ready. The tactical officer, Commander Richards, spoke up from his station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Serac fleet. It's encrypted, but I think it's a direct challenge." Stone's expression hardened. She had expected the Serac to retaliate, but this was sooner than she'd anticipated. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a hulking figure appeared on the view screen. A Serac commander, his face etched with rage, stood before her. His voice was deep and guttural. "Human, you have angered the Serac Empire. We will not rest until your species is eradicated. Prepare for the final battle." Stone met the commander's gaze without hesitation. "You're welcome to try." The screen went black, and the tension in the room thickened. The Valkyrie had proven its worth once, but this would be different. The Serac weren't just going to test humanity's defenses. They were going to destroy them. The Valkyrie couldn't carry the weight of the galaxy on its shoulders alone. "Lieutenant," Stone said, turning back to Carter, "what's the status on the repairs?" "Still working on it, Captain. We've got some systems back online, but the damage is more extensive than we thought. We'll need more time." "No time," Stone replied firmly. "We fight now. The Serac won't give us a chance to prepare." The Valkyrie may have been stronger than anything humanity had ever faced, but Stone knew that one victory wouldn't be enough to win the war. The battle ahead would be the most dangerous one yet, and this time they wouldn't have the luxury of surprise. Stone turned toward her crew, who had gathered on the bridge, waiting for orders. "Prepare for combat. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're taking the fight to them." With a sense of resolve settling over the crew, the Valkyrie once again moved toward the edge of human space. As they approached the heart of the Serac fleet, the ship seemed to hum with anticipation. The battle for humanity's survival was just beginning, and this time, it wouldn't be a surprise victory. The Valkyrie had no choice but to rise to the challenge, and this time, every question about its power would have to be answered. The calm before the storm didn't last long. As the Valkyrie cut through space, its engines humming with a strange energy, Captain Ilara Stone's thoughts were focused on the impending battle. The Serac had already proven their ruthlessness, and she knew they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. They would come at humanity with everything they had. The crew was prepared, but Stone couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into a trap. The Serac weren't just an enemy. They were a force of nature, relentless and unforgiving. Their ships, enormous and powerful, were already approaching the human position. The Valkyrie was one ship against an entire fleet, and even with its mysterious abilities, the odds seemed insurmountable. "Captain," Commander Richards said, his voice taut with tension. "We've detected the Serac fleet. It's much larger than we anticipated. They've surrounded us." Stone's jaw tightened. The enemy had been waiting for them to make a move, and now they had them cornered. But she wasn't about to give up. "We're not cornered," she said, turning toward Richards. "We have an advantage that they don't understand." The tactical officer raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The Valkyrie," Stone said, her gaze fixed on the vastness of space before them. "It's not just a ship, it's something else. It knows how to fight differently. We don't need to match their strength. We need to outthink them." As Stone spoke, the Valkyrie came alive. Its strange energy surged once again, the ship's systems humming with an intensity that almost felt like a heartbeat. The crew could feel it too, the sensation of something larger than themselves at work, something beyond their understanding. "Engaging now," Lieutenant Carter said, his fingers flying over the console. "The ship is adapting to the new data we're feeding it. It's like it's learning from the enemy's movements." Stone nodded, a small grim smile tugging at her lips. "Good. Let's see if it can learn fast enough." The Serac fleet moved into position, their ships forming a tight formation, ready to strike. They had superior numbers, and they didn't hesitate to unleash their devastating weapons. Energy blasts erupted from their massive warships, lighting up the darkness of space like thunderbolts. But the Valkyrie wasn't where it should have been. The enemy fire collided with empty space, and the ship reappeared on the opposite side of the battle, almost as if it had never been there at all. "What the hell?" Richards muttered, staring at the display. "Their targeting systems can't lock onto it. It's like we're fighting a ghost." Stone didn't answer. She was too busy watching the Valkyrie dance through the chaos. The ship wasn't simply evading fire, it was leading the Serac into a trap. As the Serac fired in one direction, the Valkyrie moved with impossible speed in another, luring them into the path of a massive asteroid field. The Serac, too focused on their target, didn't realize until it was too late. The Valkyrie darted between the massive rocks, using the environment itself as a shield, forcing the Serac to follow. One by one, the Serac ships collided with the asteroids, their hulls ripping open under the strain. It was a slaughter, but it wasn't the Valkyrie that had delivered the final blow. It was the Valkyrie's ability to manipulate the battlefield. Stone watched as the Serac forces were torn apart, their once impressive fleet breaking apart under the Valkyrie's unpredictable tactics. But the victory didn't come without a cost. Several of the Valkyrie's systems flickered, and the hull groaned under the strain of the battle. The ship was aging, its systems strained from overuse. Even with its extraordinary capabilities, the Valkyrie couldn't keep up this pace forever. "We're down to 30% on energy reserves," Carter reported, his voice strained. "The ship needs rest." Stone's mind raced. She knew the Serac wouldn't stay down long. Even as their fleet was decimated, more ships were already on the way. The Valkyrie couldn't keep up with the relentless assault. If they didn't find a way to replenish their resources, and fast, they would be in even greater danger. But the Serac weren't done yet. "We've got incoming," Richard said, his voice low. "They're bringing in their heavy hitters. This isn't just another fleet, it's their elite forces." The Valkyrie wasn't out of the fight, but it was growing weaker. Stone stared at the approaching ships, a sense of foreboding settling over her. The Serac had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers," Stone ordered. "We're not done yet." As the Valkyrie moved into position for the next phase of battle, Stone knew the Serac's pursuit would never end, but neither would humanity's resistance. The war had only just begun. The Valkyrie glided through space, its hull strained under the pressure of the battle. The Serac had regrouped, their elite forces now fully engaged. Massive warships, armed to the teeth with energy cannons, swarmed the area. The Valkyrie was no longer the lone predator in a field of prey. It was outmatched, outgunned, and its energy reserves were rapidly depleting. "Captain, the Serac have launched their capital ships," Commander Richards reported, his voice tight with urgency. "They're coming in hot. We're going to need a miracle to survive this." Stone's gaze remained fixed on the view screen, where the enemy fleet loomed large. She could feel the weight of her crew's expectations, the burden of humanity's survival resting on her shoulders. The Valkyrie had already defied the odds once, but that victory felt far away now. This wasn't a fight for territory. It was a fight for their very existence. The ship's engines hummed in response to the command she issued, but Stone could sense that even the Valkyrie was beginning to falter. The alien ship, though extraordinary, wasn't immune to the wear of war. "We need to get some distance," Stone said, her voice calm but resolute. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Lieutenant Carter, can we reroute power to shields?" Carter's fingers flew across his console. "I'm doing everything I can, Captain. But without replenishing our reserves, we won't last long under this kind of fire." A wave of frustration washed over Stone. She couldn't afford to back down. The Serac wouldn't stop. If they didn't find a way to get the upper hand, humanity's resistance would crumble. "Is there any way we can use the ship's unique abilities to our advantage?" she asked, turning to Carter. The engineer hesitated before responding. "Well, we've seen that the Valkyrie seems to have some kind of manipulation of space around it. If we could amplify that, it might give us a way to escape or even disrupt their targeting." Stone's eyes lit up. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. "Do it. Amplify the ship's spatial distortion." Carter nodded, diving back into the console. "It'll take a few moments to adjust the system. We're pushing the Valkyrie to its limits." "Understood," Stone said. She turned to the rest of the crew, her voice unwavering. "Hold your positions. We're going to make it through this." Outside the ship, the Serac's capital ships advanced, their immense firepower beginning to concentrate on the Valkyrie. Blinding beams of energy shot across space, each blast a reminder of the overwhelming odds. The Valkyrie swerved and danced between the beams, its agility unmatched, but the ship was weakening with each passing second. "Shields down to 40%, Richards reported, his voice strained. "The Valkyrie can't keep this up." "Carter." Stone barked, urgency creeping into her tone. "How long?" "Almost there," Carter replied. His hands flew across the console, sweat dripping from his brow. "Just a little longer." The Valkyrie veered sharply to the right, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The Serac ships weren't letting up. They were closing in, their massive forms blotting out the stars. But just as the pressure reached its peak, a new sensation flooded through the ship. The air felt different, charged with an unfamiliar energy. The fabric of space itself seemed to stretch and twist around them. "Now," Carter yelled. The Valkyrie surged forward, the ship's engines flaring as it tore through space, leaving a trail of distorted light behind it. The Serac ships, unable to predict the sudden shift in the ship's trajectory, fired blindly into the void, their weapons striking nothing but empty space. But the Valkyrie didn't stop. It was as though the very laws of physics had been rewritten. The ship flickered in and out of existence, appearing and disappearing in ways that no enemy could predict. The Serac fleet was thrown into disarray. The Valkyrie wasn't just evading fire, it was manipulating the very space around them, creating illusions and disruptions that left the Serac commanders scrambling. "Targets locked," Richards said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We've got them right where we want them." The Valkyrie's weapons came alive, unleashing a barrage of fire that tore through the Serac's formation. The energy blasts seemed to come from every direction, overwhelming the enemy ships before they could react. One by one, the Serac warships fell, their once imposing hulls crumpling under the relentless assault. The Serac had underestimated the power of the Valkyrie, but now, with their fleet disintegrating and their forces scattered, the tide of the battle was beginning to turn in humanity's favor. Stone stood at the bridge, her gaze hard but focused. "This is only the beginning," she muttered to herself, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "We've proven we can win." As the last of the Serac warships fell, The crew of the Valkyrie let out a collective sigh of relief. But Stone knew this victory wasn't final. The Serac were relentless, and they would be back. But now, humanity had something the invaders hadn't expected. A weapon unlike any other, and the will to fight. The battle was over, but the calm that followed was deceptive. The Valkyrie had repelled the Serac, but Stone knew better than to believe that the victory was final. The alien fleet had been scattered, but they would regroup. It was only a matter of time before they returned, stronger, more determined to wipe humanity out once and for all. As the Valkyrie limped away from the battlefield, its hull scared and systems strained, Captain Stone stood at the bridge, staring at the fading remnants of the enemy fleet. The ship had performed miracles in the heat of combat, but now the crew was faced with new questions. The ship's power, its strange, otherworldly energy, was both their greatest asset and their greatest mystery. "Captain," Lieutenant Carter said, stepping up from his station, his face tense, "we've got another issue. I've been analyzing the data from the battle, and there's something I don't understand. The Valkyrie's energy reserves, they're still growing. Even now, after everything we've gone through, the ship is absorbing power from somewhere. I don't know where it's coming from." Stone turned to him, her mind racing. She had noticed the same thing. The ship seemed to be drawing power from some unknown source, but she had no idea how or why. "Can you trace it? Can you find the source of this energy?" Carter shook his head. "I've been trying, but it's not registering on any of our systems. It's like the energy is coming from inside the ship itself. It's as if the Valkyrie is feeding off something we can't see or measure." Stone felt a chill crawl down her spine. "Is it dangerous?" He paused, unsure. "I don't know, Captain. Whatever it is, it's not like anything we've encountered before. The ship's behavior is unpredictable, and the energy fluctuations are unusual. It's almost as if the ship is alive, drawing from some external force we can't comprehend." Stone's mind whirred as she considered the possibilities. The Valkyrie had already defied all logic once. Was this just another manifestation of its strange power, or was something else at play, something far more dangerous? "Keep working on it," Stone ordered. "We need to understand how the Valkyrie is operating if we're going to survive what's coming. The Serac will be back, and we'll need every advantage we can get." The crew continued their work as the Valkyrie sailed deeper into space. The silence was palpable, the only sounds the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional click of the control panels. It was clear to everyone aboard that the war was far from over. If anything, it had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Serac were regrouping. Their defeat had been humiliating, but it had not broken their spirit. They had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. A new plan was already in motion, one that would ensure the Valkyrie and its crew would be destroyed once and for all. Back aboard the Valkyrie, Stone could feel the weight of the coming storm. The ship's energy was growing, but it was becoming more unstable. As the crew continued to analyze the data, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered, systems surged unpredictably, and strange whispers echoed through the ship. It was as if the Valkyrie itself was waking up, becoming something more than just a vessel. "Captain, you need to see this," Carter said suddenly, his voice urgent. "I've isolated a pattern in the energy signatures. It's like the Valkyrie is communicating, but it's not through any system we understand." Stone's heart raced. "What do you mean, communicating?" Carter's face was pale. "It's like the ship is sending out pulses, not just of energy, but of information. It's too complex for our systems to decode, but it's almost like the ship is trying to tell us something." Stone's mind spun. Was this what the Valkyrie had been hiding all along? Was it truly alive, or was it something even more incomprehensible? Before she could respond, the ship's alert systems blared, snapping her back to the present. "Captain, incoming signal," Richard said from his station. "It's the Serac. They're broadcasting a message. Stone's heart sank. Put it through. The screen flickered, and once again, the hulking figure of a Serac commander appeared. His expression was furious, his eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the screen. "This is not over, human," the commander growled, his voice thick with venom. "We have learned from our failure. Prepare for the full force of the Serac Empire. You will fall before us." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving nothing but the cold silence of space. Stone stood motionless, her eyes locked on the blank screen. "This is just the beginning," she muttered to herself. "We need to unlock the Valkyrie's secrets, and fast." The cold silence of space had never felt more oppressive. The transmission from the Serac commander echoed in Captain Elara Stone's mind. "You will fall before us." It was a promise that weighed heavily on her and her crew, but it was also a challenge. A challenge Stone would not back down from. Back on the Valkyrie, the ship's strange energy continued to grow, pulsating in ways that were both mysterious and unsettling. The crew was working tirelessly to understand the nature of the ship's power, but each step seemed to reveal more questions than answers. The ship itself felt like it was alive, reacting to their presence, responding to their movements, almost as if it were conscious. "Captain," Carter's voice cut through the tension, "I've isolated a portion of the energy flow. It's coming from deep within the core of the Valkyrie. But the readings, they don't make sense. The energy signatures are unlike anything we've ever encountered." Stone turned toward him, her curiosity piqued. "What are you saying? Is it some kind of power source?" "It's not just a power source," Carter replied, shaking his head. "It's alive in a sense. The energy is organic. It has a pulse, a rhythm. It's like it's breathing." Stone's heart skipped a beat. The Valkyrie wasn't just a ship. It was something far more complex. Alive, even. "Can you access it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the growing unease. "Can we communicate with it?" Carter hesitated before answering. "I'm not sure. The systems are fighting me. It's like the ship is resisting my attempts to interface with it." But his voice trailed off as his fingers moved frantically across his console. "There's something else. The energy is shifting. It's reacting to something outside the ship." Stone's brow furrowed. "The Serac." Carter nodded grimly. "It's like the Valkyrie knows they're coming. It's preparing itself." The ship's strange energy began to grow even more erratic, the lights flickering as if responding to a silent call. Stone's instincts screamed that they were running out of time. She turned toward Richards, who was monitoring the ship's exterior. "Commander, are we in any immediate danger from the Serac fleet?" she asked. Richards' eyes darted to the sensors. "We've detected a new formation. The Serac have regrouped, and it's bigger than we anticipated. They've brought in reinforcements. It's an all-out assault. They're coming for us." Stone took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We need to prepare for combat. All hands to their stations. Carter, keep working on the Valkyrie systems. We need to unlock whatever power it's holding." With a determined nod, Carter returned to his work. Stone looked out at the stars, her mind racing. The Serac were relentless, but the Valkyrie was something different, something unknown. It was clear that this ship was their greatest weapon, but it was also their greatest mystery. And time was running out to uncover its secrets. As the crew scrambled to their stations, Stone couldn't help but wonder if the Valkyrie was truly on their side, or if they were merely its passengers, along for a ride they couldn't control. But the thought was fleeting. The Serac were close, and there was no time for doubts. "Captain," Richards called out again, his voice tinged with urgency. "The Serac fleet is entering our range. They're about to launch their assault. Brace yourself." Stone nodded, her jaw set. "We fight. We hold them off. We will not let humanity fall." The ship groaned as the energy within it surged, the Valkyrie seeming to pulse with life as if responding to her command. Stone could feel it now, the ship's power, its potential. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. Whatever it was, the Valkyrie had been built for war, but it was also more than just a machine. "We're going to make it through this," she whispered to herself, even as the alarms blared, and the ship rocked with the first waves of enemy fire. Outside, the Serac fleet closed in, their ships looming like dark giants. The final battle was about to begin, and Stone knew they would give everything to survive. But there was one thing she was sure of. The Valkyrie was no ordinary warship. Whatever it truly was, whatever it held within, it had already shown its potential. Now, the crew would have to harness that power to fight against the might of the Serac. It was time to unlock the true potential of the Valkyrie. And in doing so, perhaps they would find the key to humanity's survival. The Valkyrie shuddered as the Serac fleet descended upon them, an overwhelming wall of destruction closing in fast. Stone stood at the bridge, her gaze locked on the incoming storm of enemy ships. The Valkyrie had already defied the odds once, but this was different. The Serac were no longer the unknown invaders they had once been. They were a force, a relentless and vengeful tide, and they were coming to finish what they had started. "Captain, the Serac are locking on with their main weapons," Commander Richards warned, his voice sharp. "We're outgunned, outnumbered. Our shields are barely holding." Stone's jaw clenched. The Valkyrie had taken a beating, and its power reserves were unstable. But the ship wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. "We're not backing down," Stone said, her voice unwavering. "All hands, brace for combat. Let's show the Serac what they're up against." As the crew scrambled to their stations, the lights on the bridge flickered ominously. The Valkyrie's strange energy surge, pulsing in the walls, the air, and within the very fabric of the ship. Carter had been working around the clock to understand the ship's power, but every test, every analysis seemed to return more questions than answers. The Valkyrie was not merely a warship, it was something far more enigmatic, something alive. And now, it seemed to be reacting to the looming battle. "We're ready, Captain," Carter said, his voice steady, but his face was pale. "I think the ship has fully activated its internal systems. Whatever this energy is, it's connected to the ship's core. We can push it further, but we risk pushing too hard." Stone looked at him, eyes sharp. "Push it. We need every advantage we can get." The crew's eyes flickered toward the view screen as the Serac ships loomed large. It was a terrifying sight. Enormous warships, battle cruisers, and support vessels, all advancing with one goal in mind: to annihilate humanity's last hope. But the Valkyrie wasn't just humanity's hope. It was a force all its own. The crew had only begun to tap into its true potential. "Activate the distortion field," Stone ordered, her heart pounding. "We need to get close, get within their formation. Then we'll strike." Carter nodded and immediately began inputting commands. The Valkyrie began to hum with intensity, its engines and systems glowing brighter as the distortion field activated. The ship flickered, briefly vanishing from the Serac's sensors before reappearing just beyond their lead battleship. The enemy fleet fired, their weapons shooting massive energy blasts in all directions. But the Valkyrie wasn't there. It darted through the barrage with a fluidity that no other ship could match, moving faster than anyone had believed possible. The Serac's targeting systems could barely track the Valkyrie as it slipped between the ships like a shadow. "Now," Stone whispered. With a roar of energy, the Valkyrie surged forward, its weapons coming to life in a hail of fire. Beams of concentrated energy lashed out, striking the Serac ships in quick succession. But it wasn't just the weapons that were the Valkyrie's advantage. The very space around the ship warped and twisted, causing enemy fire to veer off course, missing their target by inches. The Serac fleet, in their arrogance, hadn't expected such a response. They had underestimated the ship, and they were paying for it. The Valkyrie continued to wreak havoc, darting between the Serac ships, creating chaos in their ranks. For a moment, It felt like the tide was turning, like victory was within their grasp. The once imposing fleet of the Serac was now scattered, their ships in disarray as they tried to regain control. But the battle wasn't over. "We've got multiple ships on our tail," Richard shouted from his station. "The Serac are adapting. They're starting to predict our movements." Stone's mind raced. They couldn't keep this up forever. The Valkyrie's energy was depleting, and the Serac's relentless pursuit was wearing them down. The ship's strange power had given them a fighting chance, but even it had limits. "We need to end this," Stone said, determination flooding her veins. "Carter, can you initiate the core overload? We can take them all down in one final strike." Carter hesitated, his fingers frozen over the console. "Captain, it's dangerous. The core overload could destroy the Valkyrie. We'd be sacrificing ourselves." "We don't have a choice," Stone replied, her voice firm. "If we don't stop them now, there will be nothing left to save." The crew fell silent as they realized the gravity of the situation. There was no turning back now. It was all or nothing. "Do it," Stone ordered. Carter's hands flew across the console, inputting commands with deadly precision. The Valkyrie hummed with an even greater intensity as its core activated for the final time. A pulse of energy surged through the ship, and Stone could feel the ship's power rise to a deafening crescendo. For a moment, the Valkyrie seemed to glow with the fury of a star. The blast was like nothing they had ever experienced. A massive wave of energy erupted from the ship, tearing through space, obliterating everything in its path. The Serac fleet, caught in the pulse, disintegrated in an instant. Their ships were torn apart by the raw force of the Valkyrie's final strike. As the dust settled and the silence returned, Captain Elara Stone stood at the bridge, her heart pounding. The battle was over. Humanity had won, at a great cost. The Valkyrie had done what no one else could. And though the price had been steep, Stone knew they had changed the course of history. But as the crew surveyed the wreckage of the Serac fleet, one thought haunted her. The Valkyrie had saved them, but what would the cost be, both to the ship and to them?